Isaiah 10, 1 through 5, and 11, 1 through 4. Woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees, to deprive the poor of their rights, and withhold justice from the oppressed of my people, making widows their prey, and robbing the fatherless. What will you do on the day of reckoning, when disaster comes from afar? To whom will you run for help? Where will you leave your riches? Nothing will remain but to cringe among the captives or fall among the slain. Isaiah 11, 1 through 4. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes or decide by what he hears with his ears. But with righteousness, he will judge the needy. With justice, he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. Isaiah 10 and 11 paint for us a wonderful contrast. And that is why we have taken a couple verses from 10 and a couple verses from 11. And actually, when Elias preaches this, he'll give us a little bit of a broader context of both of these. But just to kind of summarize, remember that Isaiah 7 through 9, you have King Ahaz, who isn't the best king. He's actually a bad king, doesn't trust in the Lord. And Ahaz has put his trust in Sennacherib, who is the king of the Assyrians, and Sennacherib is also an evil man, and both of them are actually addressed in Isaiah chapter 10. So Isaiah chapter 10 addresses these guys right here. And in verses 1 through, I put 5 up here, it should be 4, but in verses 1 through 4, he addresses the leaders of Israel. So this is the leaders of Israel. And for the rest of Isaiah 10, it will be Sennacherib. And so God will address both the leaders of Israel, Ahaz certainly included in that, and the Assyrians in the second portion of this. I would encourage you to go read the rest of chapter 10 and read about what God has to say about the Assyrian king, because there is some really good stuff in there as well. And it's a similar woe. Anyways, what we want to do today is contrast the leaders of Israel and this one in Isaiah 11, the shoot from the stump of Jesse. So here we go. Let's unpack this first one, Isaiah 10, 1 through 5. Woe to those, and we might immediately just ask ourselves, who are they? Those who, and we get our answer, make unjust laws. Who issue oppressive decrees, who deprive the poor of their rights, who withhold justice from the oppressed of my people, who make widows their prey, who rob the fatherless. Okay? So we get kind of rapid fire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 examples. And the very first one tells us this, that they make unjust laws. And this tells us that we're looking at leaders. It's the leaders of the people who are making unjust laws, who are issuing oppressive decrees. Again, this tells us that we're dealing with leaders. You can't just make a law or a decree unless you're in charge. And the question then is, what do they do? What is the nature of these unjust laws and oppressive decrees? What's the nature of them? And that question is answered in this section right here. This is what the bad leaders are doing. Firstly, they deprive the poor of their rights. So there are certain rights guaranteed by God to the poor, to the weak. We have things like the year of Jubilee, where slaves are to be released. Land is to go back to the original family, those sorts of things. But often, those laws were overlooked by those who were wealthy and those who were in power. And so the poor, people who had fallen on hard times, and God had given them a way out, given them certain rights to get their property back and things like that. They were deprived of those. Here's the second one. They withhold justice from the oppressed of my people. So, the person who is poor comes in and they're demanding justice, and the judges withhold it. They don't give it. They don't give it to the people. Why? Because it's easy to take it from them. They are the oppressed ones. They're the ones with no advocate. No advocate. No one to plead their case. No one to argue for them. They have no money to make it so that somebody would take care of them. They're the poor, the weakest, the oppressed of the people. These people up here, these evil leaders, we see who they prey upon down here in particular. So in addition to the poor and the oppressed, we see that they make the widow and the orphan two more objects of their attack. So again, these are people who have no advocate. These are people who have no one to represent them. They're easy to oppress. They're easy to rob. They're easy to take from. And the leaders of the people have been doing that. So that's their evil actions. There's a lot of ways that we could think about that tells us a lot about the sort of laws that lawmakers should create. That tells us about what God does expect from the leaders of their people. They are to uphold justice for the oppressed. They are to make sure that the widow and that the orphan has hope. They are to make sure that the poor get their rights. They are not to issue oppressive decrees. The opposite, that would be a life-giving laws. Laws should give life. They should not be unjust, but just. There's a lot here for leaders. And in that, ask yourself, where am I leading? And do the people beneath me benefit from my leadership, or are they crushed by it? Here's the rebuke of God in this next part. So right here, God kind of warns them about that riches won't save. Won't save. So let's see how that happens. What will you do on the day of reckoning when disaster comes from afar? Just several questions here. To whom will you run for help? Where will you leave your riches? So we get 1, 2, 3 questions. And let's break them down now. What will you do? What will you do on the day of reckoning? And that's very judgment kind of language. The master is coming back. God has arrived. Your evil deeds while he wasn't here, now is the day of reckoning. And it won't be particularly for them that they are met by God, but this disaster that comes from afar will be the Assyrians. The Assyrians are going to come. To whom will you run for help? Like, who can you go to? Who will be able to help you out? Where will you leave your riches? All right. Nothing, here's the verdict down here, nothing will remain but to cringe among the captives and fall among the slain. And whether you're looking at the north, Israel that fell to the Assyrians, or the south that fell to the Babylonians, in 586, so more than 100 years later, you see that riches that you've taken from your people, you've robbed these people, well, you're still going to be captive. All you can do over there is cringe. Your money won't save you. You'll fall among the slain. So maybe you'll survive as a captive, or maybe you'll die. But the point is that your riches won't be there for you. No one will be there to help you. That the day of disaster will still come, and that all of this ultimately comes from the Lord as a day of reckoning. This isn't just some kind of karmic energy, cosmic karmic energy. It's God bringing the day of reckoning. So that's what their leaders were doing, right? And then that's contrasted now in chapter 11 with, over here, this other leader. A shoot will come from the stump of Jesse. Well, let's ask ourselves, what does that mean? So, number one, stump of Jesse is like Israel is kind of this tree. And it's going to be cut down, right? Particularly with Jesse, then we're looking at the line of Jesse. We're looking at the line of David. And that it will be cut down, but that from that tree which has died, the nation and the line of David in particular, a shoot will come up. And from his roots, a branch will bear fruit. Who is the branch? Who is the shoot from the stump of Jesse? Who is this? Who is this? Well, the answer is given us right here. He is the one on whom the Spirit of the Lord will rest, a spirit of wisdom and understanding, counsel and might, knowledge and the fear of the Lord. So the Spirit, here we go, is the Spirit of the Lord. And the Spirit of the Lord is also the Spirit of these things: wisdom, understanding, counsel, might, knowledge, and the fear of the Lord. It's what the Spirit does to us, does in us. And so this would have been very much the expectation for the king. David had the Lord's Spirit on him. Saul had the Lord's Spirit on him until the Lord took it away because of Saul's evil. But absolutely, there was one who would come from the stump of Jesse, a future king then from the line of David. And on this future king, the Spirit of the Lord would rest, which is normal. This person, he will delight in the fear of the Lord. So this guy over here who would take advantage of the poor doesn't fear God, but this person will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes and what he hears with his ears. He won't judge purely by what is presented to him, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice, he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. So these people over here, they withhold justice, but not this branch from the stump of Jesse. He has absolute righteousness, absolute justice, so much so that he can't even be deceived. Can't be deceived. That's what these words up here are telling us, that he can't be deceived. He'll judge with absolute righteousness and justice, and he'll judge the needy. Right? He's not going to give them something they don't deserve, but he will take care of them in absolute righteousness. With justice, he will give decisions for the poor of the earth, not just Israel, but all of the earth's poor. And so where this group took advantage of those who needed help most, Jesus, by the way, spoiler alert, is the stump of Jesse. And we could see this very obviously from the accounts in the Gospels that the Spirit of the Lord was upon Jesus to do all of his earthly ministry. It's a big theme throughout the book of Isaiah for the Messiah. Fears the Lord. And he is the judge. Jesus judges. He sits at the right hand of the throne of God Almighty, and he judges with absolute righteousness and with absolute justice. Only God could do that. Only God could not be deceived. So the one who is from the line of David is also Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God. Oftentimes, I think we have an expectation that our earthly kings will be like this. We're expecting our earthly kings to be Isaiah 11, 1 through 4. When in all actuality, we should expect our earthly kings to be Isaiah 10, 1 through 4. Because we live in a fallen and broken and sinful world, our job in the midst of all this is to be like Jesus, to love the poor, to take care of the oppressed, the widow, the orphan, to make sure that we don't put unjust laws in place where we have leadership, to make sure that we don't put place oppressive decrees in the places where we are in charge. We want to be like Jesus, who is our true king. So not only will we model ourselves after Jesus, we'll also ultimately submit ourselves to Jesus. Jesus, then, is the true king of the church, and so he should be the one who gets all of our allegiance, not earthly leaders. They can't do it. Give your allegiance to the branch from the stump of Jesse.